I, like many artists around this time of year, looked at the calendar and went, fuck, Art Fight is in a month, and my references are incredibly outdated. Even worse for me, I have created an entirely new OC universe at the start of this year, and none of these new characters are even on Art Fight at all. Though I do not lack traditional sketches of them, I sure do lack anything that I could just plop into Art Fight and use as official references for everyone to go off of. So here we are, speed running to get all of these reference boards created so I can receive attacks of my current favorite OCs from my new story. For those unfamiliar, Art Fight is an art trading game. The general premise of the game is that you upload art of your own original characters, join a team, and by joining that team, you attack, quote-unquote, other players by making an art piece of their characters. Depending on the factors that go into your attack, like work being colored, polished, animated, etc., your points vary. It's not graded by skill level at all, and Art Fight allows all kinds of visual artwork. You can create work traditionally, digitally, sculpting, animating, I'm sure the list goes on. I've even seen people make cookies of other people's characters, but that means that there are endless ways you can approach the game. Art Fight runs all through July, allowing you a full month to create as many attacks as you like or can within the month. This will be my 5th year playing Art Fight, #UNC, and every year I go into it with the changing expectations. I'm not necessarily trying to get anything specific out of the experience this year, other than to just have general fun drawing other people's characters with the hope that I will receive some attacks of my own. Getting your own OC drawn by another person is just mwah, so great, love it. But that brings me to my earlier point. The new story I made this year, that I'm currently calling Who Are You Now, has no character references because I haven't made a character reference for Art Fight since September of 2025. So we've got some catching up to do if I want people to actually be able to attack my favorite characters. This video will serve two major purposes: to create nice, polished, detailed references of my characters, and finally explain some of their lore to anyone who cared enough to click on this video. This is a treat for me more than it probably is for you, but I don't care. I'm excited to finally have some content I can point to whenever someone is looking for more context on these characters and their story. Please also keep in mind that this story is very, very fresh. It's roughly only 6 months old, so what I say in this video is subject to change, and there are still plenty of things I don't have completely worked out yet. But feel free to leave any questions that you may have in the comments. I'll take any chance to yap about my characters. So, without further ado, let's dive into the story of Who Are You Now? This story came about because of a conversation I had with someone where we were discussing how art plays a role in helping you cope with things. And I basically created this story to explore creating something that I could really see myself in. To put it simply, I created this universe to be as self-indulgent as possible, and it worked because I adore it and I think about it all the time. And it's nice to be like, wow, I'm sad. You know who else I can make sad? My OC. I will draw him so sad right now, that's perfect. Every story I create involves some level of magic, whether magical powers, magical creatures. I guess I just find creating stories centered around the real world to be boring as hell. Not that I don't enjoy those stories, but oh my god, creating them has just never been for me. My brain seems to turn off when my OCs can't summon force fields or manipulate hair. The real world is boring. Make all of these queer superheroes right now. In the world of Who Are You Now, humans have coexisted with magic and magical creatures for a long time. Overall, it has been mostly peaceful. There have probably been rules and regulations put in place to maintain a level of peace, but for the most part, things have kind of stayed fairly peaceful up until a shift in the past century or so when humans started to possess magical abilities of their own. Because some people took their newfound abilities way too far, there became a shift, with all of the different governments mandating that anyone with magical abilities join them in creating their own superhuman army. This army would seem to have no purpose other than keeping the superhumans in line for a while, but something shifted more in the culture. Magic and non-magic aspects of the world no longer existed in the same harmony. Why? I'm not sure yet, but I do know that it leads to this major magical parasite hive mind thing that continues to grow and spread throughout the world. What's this parasite called? I don't know yet either. As I said, this story is new, so I'm just trying to give you the bare bones here. These parasites feed primarily on humans. They target people they find mentally weaker in some aspect and attempt to absorb them, gaining more strength once they do so. When you are taken in by one of these monsters, you are put in a room that is meant to weaken you to the breaking point, to which they can properly kill and absorb you. These rooms that you are brought into basically are designed to mess with you as much as possible. They can alter your physical appearance so while you're within the room, can imitate a horrible place you've been before, or it can be something entirely new, but it is just meant to make you as distraught as possible. I sometimes call these rooms bad places because that's basically what it is. Bad place. These parasites can either absorb people or, in certain cases, control them through manipulation, creating a cult-like group member that they can use to gather information as well as further manipulate others. The reason they would choose to control an individual is for the specific purpose of weakening another person the individual already has close contact to eventually absorb them both if they can. Typically, the reason they would hold off on absorption is due to the individual's proximity to a magic user. Humans with magic equals more energy, more strength, and serves to make a greater absorption for the parasite, making them hunt out any humans with magical abilities more so than a human without. For heroes, they have to be very careful when fighting a parasite because of the potential person within who hasn't been absorbed yet. Heroes have to assess it to see if someone is in there. All superheroes have these watches, which project a hologram of their alerter, someone whose job is to, alert them, as well as give them any known information on the parasite, as well as if anyone is trapped within, and how they can possibly get them out. If they just attempt to kill the parasite without knowing the full picture, they can very easily kill the individual trapped inside along with it. Quickly, before I get into the characters, I thought I'd just mention that I used Procreate for all of these illustrations. Even though Procreate does have a time-lapse feature, I chose to do sped up screen recordings instead. Now, I haven't seen how this footage looks sped up yet, so I don't know if it gets a little flashy at some points, or how much I move the canvas, so I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping it's not too bad. I have the two main reasons for screen recording instead of doing a time-lapse. For one, I knew I would be talking about these characters and drawings for much longer than a 2-minute length my time lapses tend to be, and I don't really like the look of a slowed down time lapse, and with screen recording I could avoid that. And two, I just like that you're able to get a much clearer idea of my actual process. You can see me think through things, you can see me use the lasso tool, recolor, get frustrated, draw on the wrong layer, and tweak small details that just don't show up as well on a time-lapse. So yeah, we're doing a speed paint instead. I hope it's not too flashy or anything. I'll for sure try to put warnings on screen if there's any time I think it's particularly bad. Now, without further ado, my favorite part, the characters. Our main character is Miles, who at the beginning of the story is going by Katie, but for simplicity I will just be referring to him as Miles and using he/him pronouns throughout. Okay, so Miles has just started his first year at an arts college with his childhood best friend, June. Miles struggles with a lot of self-image issues. He cannot pinpoint what it is about himself that he has such a distaste for, but whenever he looks at himself in the mirror, he is entirely disconnected. He thinks he looks different every time he sees himself. His hair is always wrong. He shoves it under a hat or a bandana or just something he can cover his head with. He hides his body in baggy clothes, and he is not coping well with the way he feels about himself, and is particularly frustrated with himself because he doesn't even know how to put these feelings into words. Miles, at this point in the story, is living in the body of an 18-year-old girl and is experiencing intense, undiagnosed gender dysphoria. And when I say he's not coping well with this, I mean it. Miles has been struggling with an eating disorder for roughly a year at this point, and it's only gotten worse since college has started for him. The best part of college for Miles is that he gets an escape from his family, but not enough. Miles is attending his college, however, he commutes every day back to his family. Miles loves his family, of course he loves his family, but he has always felt like the black sheep. For Miles' entire life, he's dealt with older siblings picking on him, and parents who didn't seem bothered by this fact much at all. Miles has constantly tried to please his family, trying desperately to fit into boxes that minimize the person that he is, just to be their sweet daughter or great sister, but he can only keep up with this somewhat successfully, and has found himself exhausted and fed up by it. Miles was so excited to go away and live at college just to be able to breathe, being promised the standard college experience with his parents paying for him to go anywhere he could have dreamed of. Miles' family is rich, and when I say rich, I mean country club, golfing, fuck you money rich. When Miles has finally settled on a school, he's ecstatic. He thinks that at an art school, he'll finally be surrounded by like-minded people 24/7. But Miles isn't so lucky. Despite his parents' generosity, they tell Miles that he's not allowed to live on campus, even though they could very much afford it. Miles hates it, but he doesn't put up much of a fight because they're paying for his college after all. He can't afford to put himself through this school without them, so he goes along with it, accepting the fact that every day he'll still have to come home and mask himself as well as possible, away from everyone else in his life. On a particularly rough day, Miles is having a panic attack in the women's restroom, been there, after getting a horrible ID photo taken, been there, and hits a wall next to him, and to his surprise, shatters a few of the tiles when he does so. This is one of the many self-inserty aspects I've given to Miles. When I've had panic attacks, I often find myself hitting nearby surfaces, and I wanted this moment to be how Miles accidentally discovers his powers for the first time, wanting to be strong and cause damage to something around him. Obviously, he didn't mean to smash those tiles. He didn't know it was a possibility when he slammed his fist into the wall. And yet, here we are. Miles' best friend June saw him run into the bathroom and went to check in on him. While the two are having their heart-to-heart, an alert goes over the intercom. Parasite has been located in the building. If you can run, run. If you can't run, hide. And if you can't hide, God forbid you're gonna have to fight. This sort of thing happens a lot, but it's gotten much worse over the last few years, with the parasites seemingly growing in both strength and population. June and Miles hide in the bathroom, hoping to soon hear that a hero has come and killed the parasite off. Unluckily for the two, they have been caught up in the action when one of the heroes seemingly comes flying in with the parasite, trying to defeat it. June and Miles shakily try to make sense of what's going on through the stall gap, and after a bit of a struggle, realize the fight is over. The hero has defeated the parasite. Yay! But this hero is distraught. They can't fully make out why until they hear him on call with someone. He scolds whoever this is for sending him alone, no backup, and cries over the loss of a living person that was trapped inside the parasite, now gone. This hero is Cash, who you might be familiar with as my lovely emo man if you've seen any of my recent sketchbook tours. I'll be talking more about him in his section, but this is how he's introduced to both June and, more importantly, Miles. Cash realizes he's not alone in this restroom and tells the two that they're safe now, checking in to see how they're doing. The three of them are all a little shaken up from the experience, and once June and Miles leave, Cash notices the shattered tiles on the floor. Those couldn't have come from the parasite. Could they? The parasite was the one who flung them into the bathroom, practically forcing them both in there. It wasn't after Cash, it was hunting something. Someone. Usually, these parasites are eager to attack the heroes that fight them, looking to absorb something with a high energy. But this parasite had little interest in Cash. Even though he's a hero himself, it was hunting someone else down. Cash decides to watch both June and Miles from afar and quickly deduces that Miles is the one the parasite was after, given how, even from a distance, Cash can pick up on Miles's intense mental health struggles and eating disorder. For reasons that I'll get into later, Cash is not a fan of all the superhero stuff, but does care about the people he believes could be targeted by parasites. If he can help someone who's struggling, thinking he can hopefully decrease their risk of attack, he'll jump at the opportunity to do so, especially if he doesn't have to be fighting anyone in the process. Miles is unlikely to be the first person he's tried to help, but he's the first person that Cash also suspects has powers, due to how intensely he was being targeted. likely having abilities greater than Cash's that drew the parasite's attention away from him. Cash basically forces himself into Miles's life, seeks to primarily help him with his eating disorder, since this is not only a mentally damaging thing, but is physically weakening Miles as well. If a parasite came and Miles hadn't fully awoken his powers yet, he wouldn't be able to put up much of a fight at all. With Miles, I consistently draw 3 major forms / designs, and I want to have all versions available so people can draw whichever one they are the most interested in drawing. It's also nice to have these references for myself so I can make out the subtle differences between these designs. I'll go through all of these forms and how they reflect different aspects of Miles in the story, but the one on screen right now is how he starts in the story. I've lovingly called this version of him prepubescent. He's big into baggy clothes and hats, as we've established. I tend to like to draw him in a lot of clothes I would wear, though I think he leans into a different color palette than I do. Miles is big into blues, pinks, and purples. That's practically all I draw him in. I imagine Miles is a bit chubby. I think we just need more larger bodied eating disorder representation, because a lot of fat people with eating disorders are frequently overlooked because of their bodies not appearing sick enough like incredibly skinny bodies do. Miles is super easy for me to draw, especially because of how heavily I leaned into giving him traits that I just enjoy drawing. When I first designed him, I made him so that he would be a character who A, reflects similar qualities to me, well, B, is just also really fun for me to draw. I made this story with self-indulgence at the forefront of my mind, and you thought I wasn't going to make him look like a chubby masked dork? Of course I would, god damn it, I love him! Funnily enough, this drawing of Miles was actually the last one I made for this video. Miles has the most designs out of anyone with 3. Cash has 2 designs, while my other 2 characters, Jude and M, luckily both just have 1. But in total, I had to do 7 reference sheets in this video, and initially I was planning to do 9, and I said, fuck that, so yeah, 7 reference sheets done, and my wrist feels just phenomenal, by the way, don't even worry about it. Miles was mostly saved for last just because there wasn't a recent full body sketch I had done of him that I wanted to turn into his final design, so I had to do a quick sketch of him traditionally with his recent minor design changes. Really, the only change I've made for him more recently is just how I approach drawing his hair. I always imagined he had dreads and a mullet, but I had them super stylized for a while in a way that, while it was fun for me to draw, because it was so heavily stylized, I struggled approaching drawing it from a variety of angles, so I decided to change my approach to his hair just to make it a little bit easier for me to understand when I draw it. I've always figured his colors would be primarily blue, pink, white, and purple. Figuring out how and where I wanted to place those colors was where I struggled a bit. I do maybe want to play around with making his colors a little less saturated, or at least a little less saturated as the story goes on, because I don't know how cheerful I want his character to come off at first. I think if I keep the brighter colors, it can work to represent the fact that he does really hide the fact that he's not a very happy person, leaning into maybe how he presents himself to others, but I don't know, maybe I might end up being something I play around with in the future. The nice thing about EuroC's being self-inserts is that you can decide to make them wear Crocs because you wear Crocs and you didn't want to draw another pair of sneakers. I also don't know how well it reads. On the full body of Miles, he's wearing a bandana. It's sort of hard to tell what it is, so I thought I'd just mention that. Now, did I plan to draw it with a pattern initially to make it more readable? Yeah. Did I? No. My wrist hurts. I'm over it. I want it to be done. Now, with that being said, that brings us to Miles' second design. Let's proceed. Earlier I mentioned that when a parasite traps you, they can just fuck with you a lot mentally, change how you appear physically, at least while you're trapped inside. And this is that design for Miles. Bad place, Miles. I don't want to get too into it because I want to keep some parts of this story a secret in case I make something out of it one day, but Miles has been in his bad place more than once, and when he's in there, he always looks a little something like this. His bad place is this bright, hot pink room, heavily decorated in the most frilly way you can imagine. Pink teddy bears, lace all over, intricate cakes adorning the walls and little display cases, a big poofy bed. And when I say this room is bright hot pink, I mean it. If you were to be in this room for like, I don't know, 5 seconds, you'd walk out and everything would look green before your eyes could readjust. It's incredibly maximalist, cramming the space with so many of these decorative objects. All of the furniture appears incredibly comfortable, but the moment you sit on it, it's anything but. It's itchy, it's either stiff as a rock or so soft that you just like fall into it. Miles is only in a lingerie set that matches the room. It's incredibly itchy, pinches at the skin, and is designed similarly to the rest of the room. This is yet another thing I put onto Miles from my own experience. I don't think, for me at least, that there's a more dysphoria-inducing experience than trying on lingerie, trying to pose your features that don't belong in the most vulnerable and prominent way possible, trying to expose yourself in a way that comes off desirable, but on you feels like a violation to bear witness to against your own nature. I wanted to give Miles these incredibly long braids. Obviously, they contrast drastically from his regular design, really added to that whole girliness effect that I'm obviously going for here. I also want his hair to start at a regular length, maybe around his chest, but the more time he spends in his bad place, the longer they grow. The denser his hair gets, weighing him down as his body gets weaker and weaker. I also like it that this ties into another love of mine, Tangled. Rapunzel's long hair being a symbol of imprisonment. Fuck, that's good. Write that down, write that down. If anyone chooses to draw this version of Miles, the last thing I want to see is a smile on that man's face. If he looks like this, he is miserable, and I hashtag mean that. I also chose to draw this version of Miles a little bit thinner because his body has the potential to vary a lot in this state, reflecting Miles' inability to comprehend what his body actually looks like. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I love drawing this guy femme and miserable. Does Miles look very pretty in this design? Yes! Do I really like drawing it because it's fun to draw, despite the hair always being a pain in my ass to draw because it's so detailed? Also, yes! There are a few minor elements I change in his design as well. I make his face a little bit softer. I increase the tiredness of his face. I remove his unibrow, giving him very, very smooth eyebrows. Remove the freckles from his face, make his eyelashes a little bit more pronounced, and his lips a little bit redder. Again, all of these choices are to further emphasize the intense feminine aspect of this design, as well as highlight the physical effects of his eating disorder. The actual process of drawing this version of Miles took me a good amount of time. Even though I only had to draw him once for this sheet, I think it might just be because of two things. First, this was the first one I made, funnily enough, so I was getting used to the whole process. And second, that hair is so pretty, but god damn it, it takes a hot minute to fully draw. You can see in the speed painted that at some point I tried to color select from the traditional painting I already made of him, but decided against it since the colors don't translate quite as well digitally. Despite it taking me a while, I still really liked it, and I think it might be one of the few I filmed the entire process of. The rest I decided to not really record the line art recoloring and the shading because I find those parts to be a little less interesting, and I didn't want to have to speed up this footage more just to include it, but there's still a couple other times where I do include those things. Definitely on purpose and not at all me forgetting to stop recording. I really love this design. I'm quite pleased with it. If you draw this version of Miles, feel free to play around with it a whole lot. The whole point of this design is how much it changes, and I'm also not super tied to the lingerie set I have him drawn in. Believe it or not, I don't draw a whole lot of lingerie, so I'd love to see other people's takes on it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel for Miles, of course, and the light is basically within this next design. When it comes to humans with magical abilities, there are two forms they can switch between interchangeably once they discovered their abilities and can control them. They're born into one form, the form I tend to call their prepubescent form, but their first evolution, their beta form, if you will. Once they're able to control their powers, they are also able to go between these two forms whenever it seems most fitting. For many people with powers, they tend to use this as a way to separate their hero/magic using self from their normal identity. Their second forms, though, come with perks, I guess you could say. For some, it's as simple as appearing a little bit more conventionally attractive or feeling a bit stronger. For someone like Miles, though, it's a lot different. As I mentioned previously, Miles is chronically experiencing intense gender dysphoria, and due to a lot of different aspects of his upbringing, he cannot place what these feelings are and what they mean about him as an individual. I already mentioned that Miles, at the beginning of the story, goes by Katie, but just to be clear, he has lived his entire life up until this point as a woman. No one has clocked the fact that he is a man, much less himself. Given the fact that I've drawn this form of Miles before, I'll state the obvious, that he does learn to control his powers as well as what form he can take at will. I won't be sharing how he does that because spoilers, duh. But this form is basically just him, but transitioned with a few tweaks. I wanted to keep the aspects that make this still feel like Miles. He's still got that unibrow, he's got a couple of freckles. I want his build to show that he's strong, but I wanted to read more like one of those really buff guys with softer definition, still very, very strong, while still being fat. I don't know how to phrase it, but yeah. You don't see it in the recording, but at the end, I looked at the drawing of him and went, not fat enough, and added a bit more to him. But I still could have pushed it further. I fear. I gave him fun top scars that are unrealistic, but because he can access this form magically, I figured I can do what I want, and I like how it looks aesthetically. I think his hair is a little bit nicer. I think it contrasts from his original design, mostly through the brightness of the coloring. For both his skin and hair, I made the colors a little bit more saturated in this form, just to contrast it from his original design and to give the idea that he is more full of life and energy when he's in this form. I gave him a nose bridge piercing, a stretched septum, and stretched out his gauges in his design as well. It's not super obvious, but in his beta form, he has these small gauges, and I think it's just another fun detail for him to have his hypothetical goal size in this form. I make him a bit taller too. I just like the way this design contrasts from his first form to really emphasize the growth and strength he has gained. He has a very handsome beard, goatee, I don't know. He's got nice facial hair and general body hair. I'm still working on figuring out his superhero design. I sort of want something where his chest is exposed because one, what am I if not a and two, gotta show off them titty scars. But I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. Even Cash's superhero design isn't settled on yet, so I'm just gonna probably play around with it in the future. So unfortunately, those designs just aren't gonna be in this video, sorry. Now, Miles does have powers, obviously. And the first one is super strength. I wanted to give him these stereotypical masculine powers, so alongside that, he is undamageable by others. The way that plays out is that if someone, let's say, tried to stab him, the knife wouldn't be able to break his skin. He can still feel the pain from someone hitting him, but it's not on the same level as a normal person would, and it's not going to lead to any damage to his body. However, if damage is self-inflicted, it can still cause damage. So, if he's actively attempting to starve himself, for example, he will still face the consequences of those actions. Not as severely as a normal person would, but it's still prevalent. I don't think that for Miles, all of his problems go away the moment he gets this form, this practically ideal version of himself. I'm sure plenty of people with eating disorders can tell you that their eating disorder did not stop when they reached their hypothetical goal size. They can be much more complex than that. They're an addiction. I think that Miles' ongoing struggles with his eating disorder do impact his powers. If things continue to get more severe, he could get to a point where his powers become completely ineffective at protecting him from the harm of others, and his strength weakens overall as a side effect of his eating disorder. A lot of other superheroes switch between their two forms frequently, but for Miles, that's not really the case. He basically just decides to live in this form all the time since it minimizes his problems with gender dysphoria, and the side effects of his ED feel less intense overall. I don't think secret identities are a big thing in this world. I think some people do keep the fact that they are a superhero a secret, but it's not a mandatory thing, nor is it the expected standard. I don't think Miles hides his identity really at all. The process of drawing him went smoothly, but I realized after making it, I didn't really properly give him an outfit design. He sort of is just in gray sweats and a blue t-shirt in the other image, but my guess is he would dress very similarly to how he does in his prepubescent form, so if you really need a solid outfit, just reuse that one, I don't know. Or draw him in whatever you feel like. I don't care. I truly love Miles as a character. He means quite a lot to me. To be able to create a character like Miles that I can see myself in and hopefully make him someone other people can relate to as well makes me very happy, and I hope you all like him even a fraction of how much I love him. He's just one of my favorites for sure. I think that wraps up Miles pretty nicely, so now let's go to our next main character, Cash. Cash is introduced to the audience fighting off the parasite, all while yelling at someone over his watch. He's having some sort of argument with her, asking her to send more supers to help, as well as generally complaining about having to deal with this in the first place. Cash hates his job, but anyone with powers has to work as a hero even if they have really good reasons not to do so. Cash had discovered his powers a couple of years ago, probably around his sophomore or junior year of high school, and once he turned 18 was forced into the hero task force, and he just fucking hates it. I've mentioned that parasites will control individuals through lots of manipulation. In Cash's first interaction he ever had with a parasite was through his father. Again, I'm not going to get super specific here because of spoilers, but Cash discovers his powers through having to fight his dad, losing his dad in the process, not being able to save him. After this experience, Cash has very little interest in dealing with the parasites at all. He wants to get away from them as much as possible, and he would rather do anything else and be one of the people on the front lines fighting them off for the greater good that seems frankly unachievable. To Cash, fighting the parasites just feels like damage control at this point. In the past few years, they've only continued to spread and grow stronger. Cash does not see the purpose in putting his life on the line to fight these creatures, but he's not given a choice in the regard. The government behind the superhero task force does, in fact, force everyone with magical abilities to participate. They do have a lot of benefits in their program, like fairly high salary, as well as covering pay for college and medical bills, but they don't give their soldiers a choice. Believe me when I say that Cash does try to get out of working for them as much as possible, but if he did fully refuse pay, fun fact, they just put him in prison or kill him. So, for Cash and many other heroes, he just tries to go along with it. The way the job works for Cash and other superheroes is that he's practically always on call. If there's a parasite within his general area, he and other superheroes in that area are called in to deal with it. Cash's relationships with his different forms is fairly complicated, and he tends to spend the majority of his time in the form on screen right now. When Cash discovers he has powers, he wants nothing to do with it. He wants to run away from that version of himself as much as possible. So, in his social life, he primarily enjoys being in his first form at first, because it's the closest version to normalcy he has. When Cash meets Miles, he quickly recognizes that this guy is being targeted by parasites. The extent is unclear, but Cash wants to help him. Despite Cash hating superhero work, he does want to help prevent people from getting hurt by parasites in ways that don't involve fighting the parasites directly, and tries to help people he thinks it could be targets for parasites, and can tell Miles is at high risk. This all makes Cash sound like a great guy, but his personality tends to contradict that he is a really good person. He's snarky with an attitude problem and pokes a lot of fun at everyone in his life. All with love, of course, but oh my god, he makes fun of Miles for having an eating disorder just all of the time. I have a few interactions I've thought of that I want to make comics out of that I can hopefully show now as an example on screen. It all comes from a place of love, and he knows not to say it at times where it wouldn't be taken well. He can read a room. He's just a dick with a big heart. When drawing Cash's first form, similarly to Miles's first form, I didn't have any recent full body sketches of him I liked enough to use for his reference sheet, so I had to sketch one out traditionally on the spot. So this is the second to last one I made for this video. The process of drawing him went well. I like drawing this version of him a lot. I wanted to give him something more interesting for his hoodie design, so I decided to make it look like he bleached his hoodie. I thought it would be fun. As someone who's big into bleaching clothes myself, I thought it would be smart to give him that in his character design. It shows a bit of his personality, as well as the fact that he, too, is an art major. I don't really have too much to say about the process of drawing this one, other than I gave him the same shoes he has in his second form, which you'll see in a second, because I thought it would help tie those designs in together a bit more. But with all that being said, let's get into his second form, shall we? Despite how much he doesn't care for his powers, he recognizes that there are benefits that go along with his second form. When Cash first discovers his second form, he hates it. He associates it heavily with getting his powers and his life being changed in all of the worst ways possible from the moment he looked different and looked like this. So when he's in this form, he leans really heavily into presenting in a way that he can separate himself from it as much as possible. Part of being in your second form increases your sense of confidence, which helps with fighting typically, but Cash gets addicted to this feeling. He looks a bit older in this form, using it to his advantage to sneak into clubs and certain parties that he otherwise wouldn't be allowed into. He's more conventionally attractive. He's a bit taller and muscular. He still has his acne, but it's less all over his face and just more on his forehead, so he can hide it through his long bangs that cover half of his face. Cash also makes this choice because, well, one, he just likes how they look, but he can also hide a portion of his appearance and separate this version of himself further from what has happened. I want this version of Cash to really lean into the emo aesthetic. Sometimes it's hard for me to say what variant of emo that is. I tend to just say stereotypical 2000s emo, but I don't know if that always comes across well in my drawings of him. Cash is looking for as many ways to escape as possible, and when he can really hide himself by presenting himself in a certain way, it provides some of that escapism he's craving. Along with this, I think that Cash looks for escapism through being a big party guy and indulging in a lot of risky behavior. His life is being put on the line against his will all of the time, so he doesn't really care what problems will come out of this behavior. He just wants to indulge in the simple pleasures and just forget about things as much as he can. I don't think Cash bothers to keep the fact that he is a superhero a secret. It's mostly because he just doesn't see why it would be necessary to do so. He doesn't want to come up with fake reasons for when he has to quickly leave and go deal with the parasite. He does, however, not really talk about it. While he was still in high school before he had to do superhero work, he kept the fact that he got powers a secret for the most part, and it became a much more reserved individual, pushing away a lot of his close friends. Nowadays, I'm sure that his friends try to ask him about it because to everyone else, it just really seems like an interesting aspect of his life. But Cash tends to shut those conversations down and or talk a lot of shit about his job to anyone willing to listen, so his friends tend to know not to really bring it up. I should also explain what Cash's powers are exactly. He has acidic spit, which is only acidic when intentional. If he's kissing someone, he doesn't have to worry about like burning their mouth off. Don't worry, Miles. He can also melt into goo. Think of that one bitch from Clone High or Sky High or whatever that movie's called. I also think that every superhero tends to just have a higher level of strength and speed when they're in their second form, and I think Cash is particularly quick, doing a lot of jumpy movements when fighting with really good reflexes. I don't know how much of this is actually a power and how much of it is probably because he's just scared shitless, but hey, good reflexes nonetheless. I do think a lot later in the story, Cash gets to a point where he no longer has to do the superhero bullshit. And again, I won't be explaining how because spoilers, but I think he slowly grows to accept his second form as part of himself and leans out of the aesthetic that he's kind of forced onto himself, no longer needing this intense escapism as a part of his life. This version of his design sort of blends his two forms, still having the same build and hair of his second form, while embracing more of what he naturally looks like, as well as leaning back into what he naturally gravitates towards aesthetically, kind of like in his first form. Cash is definitely one of my favorite characters in this story. Some aspects of him are based on one of my very close friends, and I like seeing those aspects of my friend reflected in him. All of these characters are tied to my friends and me, but I want to mention that these characters are still separate, distinct individuals, put in the PHM reference.
Two distinct individuals. Both work
and aren't just a copy and paste version of my friends and me. That's especially important to mention here because we have two couples where get this, none of us are dating in real life. I was worried about this and was talking to the friend who Cash is based on, and when I was talking about Miles and Cash and how I liked the thought of them being in a romantic relationship, but I felt weird about it since they're based on our friendship, and he went, I already thought they were gay. So I went, yay! I have your blessing, and made them gay. I think these two have a slow burn, but I'm into that sort of thing. Definitely a case of Miles falls first, Cash falls harder. Ugh, God, I love them. When Cash is deep into his escapism, he keeps a lot of people away, enjoys being in these super casual dynamics that provide him with a lot of fun without having to commit to anything and be vulnerable with another person. I think through Cash supporting Miles, they become very close, being closer to each other than anyone else. And this scares the shit out of Cash, trying to push Miles away, and no shit, Miles doesn't let that happen. I think that a lot of the earlier part of their relationship is them helping each other through the bullshit that they're dealing with, all starting from Cash trying to help Miles and needing to be vulnerable to actually support Miles. I love these two a lot, and I will just say, yeah, they're endgame. Fuck it. Obviously, they're endgame. Look at them. I love when my characters are gay. That's why I only have one straight relationship ever. And that's between a cis woman and a trans man. So it's not even fully not queer. Drawing Cash in his second form went pretty smoothly, all things considered. I feel like I'm never drawing him emo enough. He's never quite there, but I do my best. I've been enjoying drawing him with those fuck-ass loop scarves recently. I like giving him a lot of bracelets and stupid t-shirts with some bullshit written on them. I do like these outfits for him, and they're definitely things I could picture him wearing, but I do wish they were a little bit more colorful than being mostly just different shades of gray throughout the design. The two colors he does wear are mostly red and green, but with these specific outfits here, they made more sense in a mostly grayscale design, but, you know, keep that in mind if you change up the outfit, which I encourage you do if you feel so inclined. I'm definitely not trying to get ideas from anyone's interpretations of my characters. That would be crazy. I would never do that. I will say that these last two characters are a little less developed than Cash and Miles. Those two are more of the main characters of the story, while these two help fill out the world further. That's not to say that I don't care about them, but they're like second tier main characters, while Cash and Miles are the main protagonists. I still love these characters a lot. I just I just have a little bit less to say about them since their side of the story tends to be a little bit simpler, but that works because I have less art of them, so let's get into it. June, as mentioned earlier, was childhood best friends with Miles, both going to at least the same high school. The two are very close. She's definitely the first person Miles comes to about his eating disorder, and she worries about him a lot, but isn't always sure what she can do to help. Even though Miles is definitely the character I relate to the most heavily, I still have put parts of myself into all of these characters, and I think that comes across with June in this way. June is a good friend, and she's eager to help, but especially when it comes to Miles, I think she can feel overwhelmed by the fact that she doesn't know what her role is in helping him. And I think Miles's resistance to help is a point of tension between these two, despite how close they are, because June is so worried about him. I think this gives June mixed feelings towards Cash, at least when they first meet. Firstly, June just fucking hates most men, so that's like her first turn off towards him. But I think she initially feels threatened by Cash seemingly becoming good friends with Miles right away. I think she feels a level of jealousy that Cash is as helpful to Miles as he is, but she recognizes that there's immaturity on her part and tries to not let that jealousy show too much. Cash being able to help Miles so well is something that she wishes she could do herself, and I think that she feels a bit threatened by him in general. Who the fuck is this guy? And why is he suddenly so close to my best friend? What is happening? After some time passes, and once she's also aware of the whole Miles having power slings of it all, she does come around to Cash, but the two definitely still tend to clash a lot, with a sort of like sibling dynamic forming over time, I hope. At the end of the day, she does love Miles a lot, and if Cash can help him more than she could, she can at least be glad that there's someone able to do something. She just tends to feel a lot of insecurity about the fact that she is not the person who can take on that role despite her trying so hard to. While June and Miles did go to the same high school, their family lives are very different. I don't have much with her family life, but I don't think she comes from the same amount of wealth that Miles has, and had to work incredibly hard to be able to get into their arts college on a full ride scholarship. Otherwise, I think her family life is a bit mixed. Gets along with her mom more than her dad, and I might be giving her a younger sister with whom she gets along with really well, but I'm not sure yet. Her family life is currently still very underdeveloped. Sorry, dear June. June is naturally very good at her art, which is dance, and is majoring in ballet. From her dance experience before college, she was always the best without ever really having to try too hard. She enjoys it for sure, and figures she'll continue to be the best anywhere she goes. One of June's biggest strengths and weaknesses is her intense sense of self-confidence, but that confidence quickly lacks any real stability the moment she's proven not to be the absolute best at something, which can make her very immature at times. She sometimes misplaces that confidence, coming off really cocky, but she has had no one to prove her wrong about being the best dancer up until this point. That is, until she meets Em. Em is another girl in the dance department at their college, and June quickly discovers that she does have competition and realizes she actually has to work quite hard to outdo Em, and it makes them immediate competitors. Both of them are ballerinas, yes, of course. And this brings me to the fact that these two are the Yuri version of heated rivalry, which I'll explain a little bit more as I talk about Em in just a second here. June, despite her cockiness, is a very kind-hearted person and definitely cares a lot about the people around her, particularly Miles, of course. And I like to imagine that she has a lot of beef with his family, constantly shits on them, even when Miles is talking about them in like a casual, chill way. And I also think that Miles's family doesn't like June either. They think she's a bad influence, with really no evidence to back that up other than she just doesn't adhere to their more conservative idea of what women should be. When it came to drawing her, I had a pretty easy time with the actual like sketching and line art of it all, but struggled with the colors. I think near the end of the speed paint, you can see me tweaking the colors and then deciding I liked my first version the most in the end anyway. So what was the point of doing all that? But whatever. June does play the bass. The reference I used for the drawing included a guitar, and I wasn't putting that much thought into it when I initially drew her, but whatever. Just pretend it's a bass, just for me. Thank you. Anyways, I really love June overall. I'm excited to think about more ways that she plays into the story, but let's move on to her lovely, low commitment, long distance, short-term girlfriend. Let's go! Emily, or M, as I had mentioned, is also a ballerina alongside June, but I think that it didn't come quite as easily for her as it did for June. The culture around ballet often carries a lot of expectations of what the female body should look like. And while M has always had some natural talent in the area of ballet, she realized that she would have to work a lot harder to be considered in the same way as her peers. And even then, she realizes she had to be significantly better than someone to get a role over them. This made M an incredibly skilled ballerina in the process. She's used to a major aspect of her competition coming down to looks. And when she has to go toe-to-toe with June, she feels very threatened because here's this girl who meets the standard, like, physically for a ballerina, and also might just be as good as her at dancing as well. I think the two of them put their frustrations onto the other, making the other a representation of everything they're envious of. But when you put that aside, there's this level of respect that they have for one another. Even though they are rivals, take it slow. They can recognize the fact that they are both extremely talented in their art. Also, hey, part of both of these girls' hatred for each other comes from how much they think the other one is just so hot. These two are incredibly attracted to one another, but I refuse to admit it, at least for right now. I think they're both competing for, like, the lead role in their ballet performance, but I want to maybe do more research into what dance-related degrees look like in terms of what sort of classes they would be taking and what performances they would actually be doing, because realistically, these two are both freshmen at the moment, so neither of them would be getting a lead anyway. I think at some point these two would grow to be much less hostile towards each other, but if we're really going in the heated rivalry aspect here, they're definitely doing some sort of, like, rivals with benefits thing before they're ever actually, like, nice to one another. Outside of M's relationship with June, she has other connections to the characters in the story, such as Cash. Similarly to June and Miles, I think M and Cash also went to the same high school and were pretty good friends up until around the time Cash got powers, with him pushing away most of his close friends at the time, which included M. In terms of family, I think M might just be an only child and lives with just her mom. Who's her dad? Don't care. He's irrelevant to both of their lives. M's mom, though, is a superhero on the task force and likely has been for all, if not most, of M's life. I think this is also a good time to note that magical abilities aren't genetic, so M is completely powerless, but is given an in to the superhero agency because of her mother, but for a whole different line of work. There are a lot of benefits to working under the superhero government agency, and despite her love for dance, she figures it would be a good idea to have a backup plan if she can't become a professional ballerina. Around the time Cash gets powers, M gets an internship working for the superhero agency as an alerter. It's probably a job that's like a grade below that, but that's what it leads to eventually. This job primarily consists of staying on top of what is happening with any potential parasites in their general area, and alerting the closest heroes to the parasite that they're about to have some freaking company, as well as giving them any information known, mainly if there's a person still potentially alive and unabsorbed. Part of the reason M was recruited in the first place was that she was really good friends with Cash, and when the government approached Cash about how he would eventually have to recruit, he, as you maybe could guess, didn't respond too well. They figured that by recruiting M, they could use someone Cash is familiar with, someone he's already close with, who could try and make him more cooperative. This, shockingly, doesn't land well. I think M is the first friend who knows Cash has powers because she's informed by her employers. And for Cash, when he gets his powers and he doesn't have to use them yet, he chooses to keep the fact that he has powers to himself. M finding out without him being the one to tell her is already enough to upset Cash, but M working for the same people forcing Cash into risking his life causes their friendship to basically fall apart at the seams. These two still have to interact once Cash turns 18, when he inevitably does have to start fighting the parasites, and there's definitely still tension between the two. Despite Cash despising the fact that M is willingly working with the government, he does secretly appreciate that there is at least some level of familiarity with M being the one who's alerting him, even though he wouldn't admit that to her. I think these two do work things out over time, but there's definitely a lot of tension, especially in the earlier parts of the story. M working with the government is definitely something she initially chose to do, not being aware of their somewhat shady practices, but I think because of a mixture of things, it's not as simple as her being able to quit once she started. M's a character who I really love and admire, like all of these characters. I really like her dynamic she has with everyone and the tension she has. I think it's funny though that with her and Miles, they're both just really chill. My thought is that maybe Em and Miles just have like a gen ed class together and they don't know about either of their connections to the other characters when they first meet, so they're both just like super chill and just like good friends right away. Luckily for me, when it came to making Em's reference sheet, I already had a finished illustration of her that I believed captured her well, so I was able to just throw that scan in there, give my wrist a little less work to do for this sheet at least. For all of these drawings, I went through my sketchbook so I wouldn't be making all of these drawings from scratch. I find that my digital art can come off a bit stiff, so taking sketches I already had made traditionally would provide a better foundation for the final drawing. Because I only really had to draw one half body for M, I decided I would put in the whole process, including the line art recoloring and shading. I definitely did not forget to stop recording. That would be ridiculous. I struggled with the colors for the outfit when I was drawing her, and something I like to do when the colors feel off is to put them in grayscale and see if there's enough contrasting values. When two colors of similar values are right next to each other in an illustration, even if the colors are on like opposite ends of the color wheel, they can still end up lacking contrast in the design. What I do from here is to decide where the value change would work best to make the design have more contrast throughout and to make the colors brighter or darker to match. This is definitely one of the many pros of working digitally on character design. The ability to easily change anything that isn't quite working and to test things out. Otherwise, outside of coloring, it was a very easy illustration to create, but I will say that I don't know if I got her skin tone entirely right. I think canonically it's closer to the traditional drawing I put in, but I struggle to translate it digitally. Regardless, here's the final M. That wraps up the last character sheet of the video, so I guess I'll give my closing thoughts here. I am someone who loves drawing, and when I say I love it, I think I might love it more than anyone else I know. I am constantly drawing, and my output is a lot, but I couldn't tell you the last time I made this many finished illustrations back to back in such a short time frame. Obviously, I enjoyed myself. This would probably taken a lot longer if I didn't, but I started with Miles's sad form on Sunday, May 31st, and finished all of these character sheets by Friday, June 5th. And outside of these, I was still filling pages in my sketchbook, and for some reason felt called to do an entire finished illustration with a background of Miles and Cash. So I may be just a little bit tired, but more than that, I'm actually just very proud of myself. Bulky projects like this tend to intimidate me, so completing it made me very happy. And the best part is now I have character sheets of all of my characters that I can look at and admire all the time. This experience has also made me a lot more excited and open to working digitally. My preference tends to lean more towards traditional art. I like the permanence of pen on paper. I like playing with colors. The way colors can layer and interact is very, very fun to me. And I've avoided digital because it lacks some of those qualities. But I've definitely learned through the process of making these that digital art can be a lot of fun. And maybe that's why in the middle of this project I went, wait, I really want to make a complicated drawing with an angle I'm not familiar with and do it with a cohesive palette. Wait, I'll do that digitally. Oh my god, I can put this shit in grayscale and fuck around with the gradient map tool. I love my life. It's been super fun to upload my characters to Artfight and take a peek at other people posting their own characters as well. I have plenty of characters already bookmarked. I think maybe now would be a good time to mention that I do, in fact, have my Artfight in my link tree in the description in case you want to draw any of these guys. Artfight brings me just so much joy. I plan on updating of my other OC's character references because I just went through and archived a bunch of the designs that don't hold up at all, and hopefully I'll bother to fix them before Artfight. But dude, now I have 7 character sheets locked and loaded, so even if I don't get to those in time, oh well. I hope you enjoyed getting to hear about my characters. This has been a really time-consuming video for me to make, so I hope you enjoy it. And it would mean a lot to me if you stuck around. I plan on making some Artfight content once the season is upon us, and plan on creating plenty more art videos that will inevitably include my OCs. Otherwise, I guess, just thank you for watching. I appreciate that you cared enough to listen to me yap about my OCs for God only knows how long this video is. Hope to see you all participating in Artfight this year. If you're on the fence about joining, I can highly recommend it. It's a ton of fun over here. If you enjoyed, I'd love it if you stuck around. Have a lovely rest of your breakfast, lunch, and or dinner, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.